Hi, I'm Ian Lees, and you're listening to Scottish Shindig with Andy Phillip on Radio GH.
The Scottish Shindig, the best in Scottish dance music and song.
Well, hello and a very warm welcome to the Scottish Shindig. It's Andy standing in for Ewan, who's away on his travels and playing around the country, and sit back and enjoy the next hour of great music and songs from the Scottish Shindig, and we'll get underway very, very soon. To get us off to a great start, here's Alan Nicholson Band with from the album The Plough and the Stars with a Boston two-step. Well, a great rousing start to the programme from Alan Nicholson and his band from the album The Plough and the Stars with a Boston two-step, and a great sound it is too. Hope you've had a great week. The weather's been fantastic. It's to be the same for the next week. And the wind will drop, so all good. Maybe a bit of heat. Anyway, we'll continue with tempo fairly high up here with a track from an album, The Accordion Bonanza No. 2, I think recorded back around 1981 by Clinkscale, and with a selection of artists. This one being Andrew Rankin, so I'll play this one for Marge over in Missouri, and here is Andrew and the band with a selection of reels, starting with Ian MacPhail's Miss Mary Printy. a great selection. Great tempo, great swing. That was Andrew Rankin and his band from an album called The Accordion Bonanza No. 2 with a selection of great reels there. Well, we started off up in Shetland and we're going back there for the Cullivo Band from their album Hairst Blinks. Here is a polka called Young's Shetland Wedding. Lovely sound from the Cullivo Band with a track called The Young's Shetland Wedding from the album Hairst Blinks. Well, I hope you've all been having a great time. And next up, if you've been listening to Pia's roundup of the Accordion Fiddle Club news, you know that this band is playing a club near you. Neil McEachran and his Scottish dance band from an album called From the Banks of Loch Lomond. Here they are with A Gay Gordons. great rousing medley from Neil McEachran and his Scottish dance band from an album from the banks of Loch Lomond. That was, of course, a medley for the Gay Gordons. Well, we'll ease the pace back a wee bit, and it's time for a song and a tune from the Alexander Brothers, from an album, The Words and Music of the Alexander Brothers. Here they are with a medley including Come by the Hills. So if you're tuned in, Donald, get singing.
Is free, and stand where the peaks meet the sky and the lochs reach the sea, where the rivers run clear and the bracken is gold in the sun, and cares of tomorrow must wait till this day is done. Come by the hills to the land where life is a song, and stand while the birds fill the air with their joy all day long, where the trees sway in time and even the wind sings in tune, and cares of tomorrow must wait till this day is done. There's meadows in Lanark and mountains in Skye, and pastures and heathlands and lowlands far by, but there's nae greater lot than the head to desire, than to herd the fine cattle in bonny Strathire. Oh, it's up in the morn and the waty the hill, when the lang summer days are sae warm, sae still, till the peak of Enforlock is girdled with fire, and the evening falls gently on bonny Strathire. By yon bonny banks and by yon bonny braes, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love wherever wanting gay, by the bonny, bonny banks, oh Loch Lomond. So you take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks, oh Loch Lomond. So come by the hills to the land where fancy is free, and stand where the peaks meet the sky and the lochs reach the sea, where the rivers run clear and the bracken is gold in the sun, and cares of tomorrow must wait till this day is done, and cares of tomorrow must wait
Unmistakable sound of the Alexander Brothers from an album called The Words and Music of the Alexander Brothers, and a lovely medley starting off with Come By The Hills, and I hope you're all singing along there. The next track comes from Ian Cruikshanks and his band from an album About Time Too, and it's a great selection. It's for the Black Mariah. Lovely selection from Ian Cruikshanks and his band for the Black Mariah from an album About Time Too. And we'll slow the pace back a wee bit this time with a track from Janet Graham and her album The Strathcarron Collection. Here's Janet and the band with A Scottish Waltz. Enjoy this one. lovely playing from Janet Graham and the band, with a lovely medley of Scottish waltzes from our album The Strathcarron Collection. Well, the next track, we're almost halfway through the programme, would you believe, and it's time to have a wee trip to something different. And this time it comes from a great album, An Audience with the Accordion Champions, and here is none other than Jim Lindsay with a great rendition of a Billy Joel composition called The Root Beer Rag, and a great one it is too. Here we go, Jim Lindsay with The Root Beer Rag.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Lindsay!
Well, fantastic playing there from Jim Lindsay with a track called Root Beer Rag, composed by Billy Joel, and you'll find that on an album called An Audience with the Accordion Champions. And what a medley it is too. Well, time for another wee song, and given the time of year, and well, Ewan and I often talk about this man, and in the conversations we used to have with him, co-founder of Radio GH along with Ewan, it's Derek Hamilton, and here's Derek to sing Galway Bay.
If you ever go across the sea to Ireland, then maybe at the closing of your day sit and watch the moon rise over Clodagh and see the sun go down on Galway Bay, just to hear again the ripple of a trout stream. And the women in the meadows making hay to sit beside the turf fire in the cabin and watch the barefoot gossams at their play. The breezes blowing o'er the sea from Ireland are perfumed by the heather as they blow, and the women in the upland digging craties speak a language that the strangers do not know. For the strangers came and tried to teach us their way. They scorned us just for being what we are. They might as well go chasing after moonbeams or light a penny candle from a star.
The unmistakable, unforgettable sound of Derek Hamilton with Galway Bay. And to the other co-founder of Radio GH, Ewan Galloway, here's Ewan with Graham Cairns and a selection of polkas from their album Banjalodian. Great sound from Ewan Galloway and Graham Cairns from the album Banjalodine. That was some polkas. Well, time now for a military two-step, and this time it comes from Graham Mitchell and the Scottish dance band from an album In Full Swing. So take your partners for a military two-step. Great sound from Graham Mitchell and his Scottish dance band from an album In Full Swing. That was, of course, a military two-step. Well, this time for a Canadian band dance from Roy Henry and an album called Let's Dance. Here's Roy and the band with a Canadian two-step. Lovely track from Roy Henry there from the album Let's Dance. It was, of course, a Canadian band dance. Well, we'll stay down in Ayrshire, a couple that stayed for many years in Ayrshire and based down that way were Joe Gordon and Sally Logan. And here's the Gordon family with Bonnie Galawa. Lovely track from the Gordon family, Joe Gordon, Sally Logan with Bonnie Galawa. Well, time to move up the country a wee bit to Perthshire. Here's Stephen Carker and his Scottish dance band with a Mayfair two-step from their album Fine Mix. great sound of Stephen Carker and his Scottish dance band with a Mayfair two-step from their album Fine Mix. Well, something a bit different again. I heard this on Gordon Young's Ceilidh on Radio GH some time ago. Thought it was a great track and it's worth hearing again. Absolutely. Here is Blair Douglas from an album called A Summer in Skye and with a great tune called The Guga Hunter. Great track there from Blair Douglas from an album called A Summer in Skye, The Guga Hunter. And there's a great story behind the tradition of Guga hunting, but that's for another day. Anyway, unfortunately that brings us to almost to the end of the programme. Thanks very much for your company for the last hour. I hope you've enjoyed the selection of music, and I'll leave you in the very capable hands of Charlie Kirkpatrick and his band from an album West is Best with Houlihan's Jig. All the very best to the next time. I won't be here next week. I'll be back to you and I'll be in Haddington. So all the best, take care and enjoy the rest of your week. Here's Charlie Kirkpatrick and his band with Houlihan's Jig. Cheerio. All the best, folks. Take care and have a great week.